Hello, this is Meet the Expert, the series of podcasts on swine health management in practice brought to you by Boehringer Ingelheim. My name is Peter Best. For this episode, I'm talking to Dr. Klaus Deppner in northern Germany about the spread of the African swine fever virus in Europe since 2007. Dr. Deppner is a virologist and he heads a small working group called Transboundary Animal Disease Management within the Institute of International Animal Health, One Health, at the Friedrich Loeffler Institute, or FLI, the German Federal Institute for Animal Health. Dr. Deppner, I mentioned the arrival of ASF in Europe in 2007 when it entered Georgia. Was that when you started to be involved in investigating it?
Hello, Peter. My pleasure to be your guest today. Yes, my involvement started a long time before in Africa, but 2007 I was also involved in Georgia and then in Armenia, and then later with the spreading to the European Union or to Eastern Europe, where I was involved with African swine fever.
For sure, we must control ASF, Dr. Deppner. Where do we start with that? You're the virologist with a lot of experience of this disease. Where do we start? Is it with the pigs or with the people?
I would say with both. So first of all, you would need a little bit of basic knowledge about pigs and about the disease. Without that, you will not be able to control it. But nevertheless, it showed the disease. We learned that it's a human-made disease. So it's a matter of what people are doing and how they behave, how they transport the virus. So, for example, what I have seen in the Caucasus region is then where you don't have at that time a compensation scheme for farmers which are losing the animals. So the pigs are dying or start to become sick, and the people then, to save money, they slaughter the sick pig. And then you have suddenly so much cheap meat on the market, on the black market, and everybody buys this cheap meat. And then this cheap meat is, of course, contaminated meat or infected meat. And then it's carried in the suitcases, in the cars, over hundreds of kilometers. And that's how the disease is spread. Humans are spreading the disease, not so much the animals from nose-to-nose infection. We, the humans. So you don't need a virologist or an epidemiologist. Actually, you need an anthropologist or sociologist to cope with the disease. So we have to work holistically.
Yes, we haven't got a sociologist with us today, but I must say from my point of view, I'm not sure how much we can control human behaviour in this case. I mean, what can we do as veterinary people interested in the health of swine herds if they're at risk from this human intervention? We can control a little bit what the humans do on the farms, but we've got very little hope of changing behaviour outside the farm, have we?
It's education is the most the word, the most important word. Of course, if we can have a good farm management, we can prevent introduction of the virus into the farm. And good farm management is also is part of education, in educating the laborers, the veterinarians, and all this kind of people. Then you can prevent your introduction of the virus. More difficult is preventing it in the forest, in the wild boar population. But for domestic pigs, by good biosecurity and education, you might do it. But it takes time. That's unfortunately, it's said so easily and it's so clear for everybody. But when it comes to implementing it, it becomes complicated.
Yes, Dr. Deppner, we're having this conversation for this podcast while Germany, where you're based, is battling to beat ASF after the virus apparently came across the Polish side of the border in wild boar. You're based in Germany, as I say. Can I ask you how much success do you expect for the current German actions aimed at stamping out, such as establishing these so-called white zones?
So stamping out would be the wrong way to approach it, because we are here in Germany. Only the edge of an epidemic, which is center, is much farther east. So stamping out would mean to eradicate the whole epidemic, which is not located in Germany. It's on the Polish side. So the best what we could do, or we can do, is to stop spreading further westwards Germany. That is one biggest task which we have now, to stop this wave, this epidemic wave, to stop it. And we are in a way lucky, because we can learn a lot from the Czech and from the Belgium experience, which successfully eradicated the disease. However, in their case, they were singular hotspots or clusters. It's not like in our case, where we are just the edge of a larger epidemic.
By the way, I mentioned white zones. For our listeners and viewers, would you remind us, please, what is a white zone?
Yeah, the white zone is so. Take another way. You have we call it core area. That's the area where we find infected animals. Now, when we are clear about the size of this core area, we would like that no pigs which are infected should leave this core area, and then the white zones comes into the scene. So we, like now in Germany, around the core area, we have a corridor about 5 kilometers size. So like, corridor where we put fences, and inside this core area, which theoretically is edging the white zone. Sorry, inside this white zone, which is edging the core area, theoretically the virus should not be and we then try to to hunt all animals, or to catch them inside the white zone. Then, in case infected animal would escape from the core area, in the white zone area, there will be no other pigs which he can infect. That's the idea.
The size of the area for a white zone, could that be large or small?
So, as I said, as we choose about a size of 5 kilometers, depends on the habitat. Depends if you are in more agricultural area or forested area. That has to be decided case by case. It's not a general rule where you say the core area is that size, that's so large and so huge. So you have to see which natural barriers you have, which artificial barriers you have, you can use. Important is you have to fence the white zone area so that you can conduct your measures. So the French have done it, and the Belgians have done it successfully, using the fencing and producing the white zone. So that we tried to do in Germany also.
Has there been additional fencing at the border to stop this?
Of course. Yes, of course. Initially, we had electric fence, and now in the areas there where they have the disease, the solid fences are now replacing the electric ones. It's a tool, only a tool. No?
From your expert perspective, would you say we have a good chance of stopping it going further west in Europe?
Yes, I think so. I have to be optimistic, of course, but we have learned a lot during the last years, particularly what has happened in countries. So we have also learned from countries where things did not work, and also learned from countries where it worked. So now I hope that we can use this knowledge, and I hope it will work. So we have the strategy of fencing, the strategy of doing the white zones, and also the surveillance strategy, taking out the carcasses. The areas are so large, meanwhile, that it's very difficult to do the same what we do now here. So in an area which is large as a whole country, it's really difficult to design a white zone, for example. Where do you want to put it? That's the point. So there we have to think for better or alternative ways of getting rid of the disease, which I'm not clear how to go. Probably the same way to make compartments and to try to get rid in a particular area of, and then produce kind of white zones. That's really difficult. Where we waited too long and the area is too big, the management of large areas, it becomes at the end impossible.
At the local level, then, it seems to me the way to go against ASF, from what you say, is to establish and maintain stabilized conditions on the swine farm and in the surrounding area if that's possible. Is that correct? You think we should establish these more stable environments both within the farm and in the area around it?
I think that we have no other choice. We have to improve our biosecurity. We have to to keep the disease there in the wild boar population where it is, not to spread out of that particular population, and to stabilize it, and then gradually we will also succeed to eradicate it. Unfortunately, African swine fever is a disease where you need lots of patience, and sometimes doing nothing is better than doing something which is counterproductive. But you have to have patience for this disease. It takes time.
Let me pause for a moment to remind everyone that more information on this conversation, like articles, publications and videos, can be found on the website PRRS.com. Could we use the hunting people to help us monitor the wild boar population in any way?
Of course, at least for wild boar, without a good cooperation with hunters, we are lost. So they are the one which at the end of this process will do the job. And for them, it's double difficult because the strategy is quite tricky. So in the area where you have indeed circulating the virus, so where you have the epidemic, there is no hunting allowed. However, in the area immediately bordering the core area where you have the disease, a lot of hunting has to be done to reduce the population, and that it's a logistic challenge to do that. And also the hunters have to be patient, not to hunt where you have the disease, but to increase hunting where you don't have the disease.
What's the right way to do surveillance of wild boar populations for ASF virus?
The carcass search is the most effective tool or the best way to identify ASF in wild boar and to identify it earlier. Testing hunted animals is it's also good, but it's not the fastest way because normally only healthy animals are shot, not sick animals, and healthy animals, they will be not positive for African swine fever. So the way to go is to search for carcasses, and some strategies even offer hunters money to report carcasses and to search for carcasses. So in some places, in some countries, they get even money for carcass search.
You've mentioned the ASF situation in some European countries. I noticed that you're engaged in a European Union project regarding ASF. Is that in the Ukraine? What is that project?
It's not Ukraine. I am in the Baltic states and then in the West Balkans. What we do there, particularly in the Baltic states, is we do lots of farm investigations where they have the outbreaks, and our main aim is to develop strategies how we can detect as early as possible the disease, and then to see how we can avoid that the disease spreads to other farms. So it's rather So field investigation of outbreak field investigation, which we do, and what we can learn out of this, and finally improving our strategies and even going so far to advise the managers to change legislation accordingly. So that is what we do.
Does that suggest we need almost prescriptive programs that are customized for each country to manage ASF? One size does not fit all.
There are some aspects which are general, of course, which can be already now used, but the other ones, particularly when it comes to the disease in wild boar, you always have to consider the particularities of the affected region, of the habitat. You have also to see what kind of manpower you have, what kind of financial resources you have, and then you have to make a tailor-made program for the particular area. What is not the case for the domestic animals, there it's much more clear what you have to do under which conditions.
Dr. Deppner, in a separate conversation, I asked you about the chances of the virus changing. I need to come back to that, if I may, for this podcast. Just to be clear, as a virologist, would you expect the ASF virus to change its molecular structure or properties as the epidemic in Europe continues?
You know, this changing of viruses is absolutely normal and natural, and it happens always and everywhere. So the point that the virus is changing is something very normal. The question is, the changed virus which has changed, has this new variant survival chance? Is it good for the virus to change or not? And normally, say, most changes or nearly all changes, they are not in favor for the virus, so they will not survive in the population. Only few changes which give an advantage of survival of this new variant. And then we have to see if that happens. So far, I can't see that we have a change which will give an advantage to the virus, because only that change which give an advantage to the virus is of significance. The other one, they will be dead ends, they will die out. So it will not, they will not survive in evolutionary. And it takes normally, under natural historical perspective, it takes hundreds of thousands of years until you have real changes which then give a new phase of the disease. What we have, of course, we have changes on the genome side, which we then also can use for molecular epidemiological tracing. We can say, okay, this line is more present there than the other ones, or this strain. But in fact, from the picture of the disease, not much change. So we still have the high case fatality and the same way of contagiosity and this kind of issue.
If I might ask you for one further forecast, what do you think is the likelihood that we will have an ASF vaccine?
Maybe I should change the question. Not the likelihood to have a vaccine, the likelihood to use the vaccine. That would be more interesting. If we would have a vaccine, who would use this vaccine? Under which conditions? So I would say it might be understandable, or it might be logic, or might whatsoever. I can see that we might have a vaccine. How good this vaccine is at the end, so in the way how immunogenic it is, I can't tell now. It would be not such a good vaccine as for classical swine fever, for example, where we have an excellent vaccine. But now, under which condition you would use the vaccine? Where we definitely would need a vaccine would be for wild boar. And in that case, you can only use a live bait vaccine, where you throw the baits out in the forest, and the wild boar will eat it and will get immunized. And there I don't see that we will have soon a vaccine. That's quite complicated. For domestic pigs, a needle vaccine might be there, but under which condition you could use it preventively or in case of emergency. As now in the European Union, where you have a quite good veterinary service and a good biosecurity, I doubt if we would use a vaccine under other conditions in other countries. I can't predict it, but under our conditions, I don't see that we would use a vaccine for domestic pigs. I can't see the conditions where we take the decision to use it.
Would that perhaps depend on whether we can test and distinguish between vaccinated and naturally infected pigs?
That might be helpful if we would have that tool, but even to use a so-called DIVA vaccine, these are the DIVA vaccine, you have to take a decision to vaccinate. And I wonder which disease manager would take that decision. If he might say we have better tools to prevent ourselves, or it's easier than to cull one herd instead of vaccinating a whole country or something like that. No? So it's rather, a more management decision, a political decision, an economic decision. Would vaccinated pigs against African swine fever compete on the market or not? That would be a question. All these kind of issues.
At the moment, anyway, without that vaccine being to hand or regulations to allow it, we've got to control this in the ways that you've described, and that begins with education of the general public, so that they're not transmitting the virus or carrying it with food or other substances. It means also good farm biosecurity, so that we don't allow it to enter if possible. It means trying to control it within the farm if there's an outbreak, to stop it going anywhere else. And on a national level, it means identifying those zones where an infection occurs and to ring fence in the sense that you try to remove the virus from those areas. You're an optimist, you've told me, Dr. Deppner. You obviously feel quite optimistic that control is in our hands.
But we have to be very patient. For domestic pigs, I'm really optimistic. For wild boar, I force myself to be optimistic because we had a little bit success in Belgium and in Czech Republic. And if we are patient and we do not do stupid things, then we might succeed, at least blocking and stopping the wave of the epidemic. So that would be my prognosis.
On that note, we must bring this podcast to a close, Dr. Dettmer. Many thanks for giving us your insights into the virus that is African swine fever. Thank you also to our listeners for joining us in this. We always welcome your feedback. There will be further Meet the Expert podcasts in the series coming along, so stay tuned. But for the moment, our thanks again to Dr. Klaus Deppner in Germany. Goodbye and stay tuned. Just before you go, we hope you've enjoyed hearing our conversation with the most recent winners of the annual European PRRS Research Awards. Bear in mind that next time, one of the winners could be you. Boehringer Ingelheim is again providing 3 awards of €25,000 to fund the winning PRRS research studies in Europe, and is particularly interested in practical proposals. The deadline for submissions is the 1st day of July, and more information can be found on the website PRRS.com. We hope to hear from you.